Well, they finally did it, the absolute madmans. Treyarch released a Call of Duty game without a single player campaign. Of course, most folks are going to say that if you buy Call of Duty games for their campaigns, that you're nothing more than a jaded boomer, who should go back to playing Vanilla Doom and Quake. Yeah, let's just all act like Call of Duty 2 and Modern Warfare 1 didn't have some of the best single player FPS campaigns of all time. Anywho, it's that time of the year and we've got our annual installment into the Call of Duty franchise with Call of Duty Black Ops IV. But wait, Sunny Jims, this one's different. Not only does it have zombies in your traditional multiplayer modes like Team Deathmatch and Kill Confirmed, but in a series of events no one saw coming until they saw it coming, it's also got its own Battle Royale mode called Blackout. Holy shit. Now, I said Black Ops IV doesn't have a campaign, which is a first for the series, but what it does have instead are training missions for each of the new specialists, with unlockable cinematics that serve to fill in their respective backstories. Imagine the operator videos in Rainbow Six Siege, but even edgier if that was even possible, and you're on the right track. These are pretty good, but some of them are just needlessly violent for no real reason. Like the intro cinematic showing a woman with half her face blown off, huddling in a corner, gurgling blood. I mean, was this really necessary? They're not really all that important though, and I doubt many players care all that much about it. They're only there to let you come to grips with all of the specialist abilities and gadgets, and how these work in a low-risk environment. And then that all feeds into all that really matters, which is the multiplayer mode, as has always been the case. Now, Black Ops IV can be broken down into three main modes. You've got the traditional multiplayer, you've got zombies, and the new Battle Royale mode, Blackout. Let's have a look at all three of them then, shall we? Starting with the multiplayer. Now, all I wanted going into this was a boots-on-the-ground Call of Duty game, and it seems to some point that is what we've got. There's no annoying wall running, double jumping or thrusting, or whatever the hell that's called. All that stuff is gone. You can still pull yourself up ledges and vault over waist-high walls and whatnot, and one of the characters has a grappling hook, but otherwise the movement is pretty bare-bones stuff. I read a lot before I got into the game about the time to kill being higher than before. Now, I don't know if it's been changed since the beta, but to me, it didn't feel all that bad. There might have been a second or two longer to take someone down, but gun on gun, you don't really notice it all that much because of how much you're concentrating. And I've been on both ends of just melting someone or being melted before either one had time to react. What really throws a spanner into the works here though is the inclusion of the armor and healing stim that restores all your health points in literally seconds. Not to mention a specialist that can buff everyone's health points to 200 above the normal 150. When that comes into play, yeah, you're gonna notice it's gonna take a lot longer to put someone down. Trying to down someone in armor, for instance, often isn't possible. It's very weapon dependent. And if you're in combat with someone who's able to take cover and heal themselves, well, that's essentially double the time it's going to now take to kill them. And this is just in the traditional multiplayer mode. This has got nothing to do with Blackout, which I'll talk about soon. Where they've really gone and messed things up, though, I think, is with the different specialist classes. So the specialists are all these characters you can play as who have a bunch of different abilities, and there's 10 of them in the entire game. There's a girl who can throw out a cluster grenade, there's a guy with a grappling hook, there's one that can bring up a riot shield, and another one can send out an attack dog. Because it wouldn't be a Black Ops game without those annoying attack dogs, right? Now, it might sound fine on the surface, and it is kind of fine for the first couple of hours, until you're getting killed again by some explosive trip mine you couldn't really have ever seen. Or yet again after you've taken a flashbang to the face you can't possibly counter. I don't know if they're trying to compete with Overwatch or Rainbow Six Siege with this, but either way these abilities are often just incredibly annoying and they just really feel out of place in a Call of Duty game. Skills and tools like this should be giving an advantage to the player. I don't think they should be able to score outright kills, which is what happens a lot here in Black Ops IV, to the point where I'd honestly say I'm probably dying as much to them as I am to actual gunfights. Firebreak, for instance, is this guy who walks around holding a small reactor core that he can unshield, causing pretty massive radiation damage. Not to mention giving him resistance to damage while he's using it, and I've been able to take out 3 or 4 people at a time with this thing. It's often just incredibly broken. And you'll be on the giving and receiving end of these abilities pretty much constantly. The other thing too is that some of the specialist equipment is far superior to others. I mean, it is kind of mode dependent, but a flashbang's always going to ruin your day regardless of the mode you're playing. And I think that's the problem. It just seems kind of haphazard to have all these various abilities and equipment thrown into the mix, especially without there being any thought on how the player can possibly counter them. Like, some of them are just free kill buttons. Problem is, if they leave them, people are going to complain about it. But if they buff or nerf them, well, people are still going to complain about it. So it's a mechanic that's really tricky to find even footing. Rainbow Six Siege is a game that I reckon comes pretty damn close to this, having different operators that can counter the abilities of others. But even that's not perfect all the time. You're just going to have to accept and get used to seeing these things spammed all the time. Or, I don't know, find another game to play. And then there's the hallmarks of the series, like all those obnoxious kill streaks and elements of the shooting mechanics which are basically memes at this point. Like being able to basically one-shot most people by hip-firing a shotgun, and how effective no-scoping still is due to the engine's hitboxes. I mean, why are we still putting up with this shit in 2018? This is another game in the series that just runs like absolute crap, even when I've installed it on an SSD. I spent probably 20 or 30 minutes going through my visual settings, just playing around with things to see what the culprit was, but even with all of the bells and whistles turned down, the game just still performs horribly, with a really erratic frame rate. I can't fault them for the amount of options they've included though, and they've done that thing where they include example images of what the settings look like when it's on or off. It makes it pretty easy to scale things back, but if they've gone to all this much effort, I mean, why does it still run this badly? And you know what? It doesn't deserve to perform like this, considering it doesn't look all that good either. A stuttering frame rate isn't really the kind of thing you want to worry about when you're playing a multiplayer shooter, but if you're going to play Black Ops 4, well, you better get used to it, bitch. Then there's the issue of the hit detection and the lag compensation, which is something that's been a real problem in the series since I think around Modern Warfare 3, and it's the same shit all over again. You know what they say though, if you can't beat them, join them, and my trick was to just jump around pretty much every corner to abuse the desync. I mean, it's better than watching yourself not even react on someone's kill cam because of the delay. I think we've all experienced this at one time or another. You know when you turn a corner and pretty much get instantly gunned down, but when you watch on the kill cam, you're in that other player's line of sight for what feels like seconds. But I mean, it ain't all that bad though, there are some good changes. I like how they've removed grenades from loadouts now, so you're not constantly getting grenade spams on control points, or just grenade spam in general. You don't see those kills anymore where some dickhead randomly threw a grenade across an entire map that just happened to land at your feet. Only a couple of the characters have grenades, and even then they're on a cooldown after a single use. This is a positive change. I like how the kill assist thing works now too, so instead of like before how you'd be shooting at someone but then some asshole would come in and take the killing shot, well now it works that you still get credit for the kill. It is a double-edged sword because even when you're shooting at someone and do a smidge of damage it counts as a kill, but it's a good alternative to having people steal your kills, which is something that always used to piss me off. Black Ops 4 also supposedly has dedicated servers, though I didn't really see all that much of a difference between the way matches played in this and in World War II, so who knows. But it's all kinda obvious though that this mode has come second fiddle to the Blackout and Zombies. And I think that's obvious by the fact that the majority of maps in rotation are just maps from Black Ops 1 and 2, but I will admit they are the best maps from those games. Summit, Slums, and one of my personal favourites, Firing Range. And yeah, Treyarch knew what they were doing back then when it came to designing these, and they're still really fun to play again in 2018. To be honest though, I don't mind the multiplayer all that much. I'm a bit of a sucker for the multiplayer in the Call of Duty games. I just don't recommend playing them during school holidays or really late at night, where you'll pretty much be playing against sweaty teenagers or man-children who are going to stomp you because they've replaced the social life with hitting prestige on launch week. I hope too that the game running on Battle.net means we won't see any cheaters either, because the reporting system in Steam was just absolute garbage, and COD World War II was rampant with cheaters at the time. But it doesn't take all that long though before the whole thing starts to feel familiar. After you played for a few hours, you'll feel like you've seen and done all there is to do. Now you're just leveling up to get your hands on that next assault rifle or SMG, then you level up that weapon to get the attachments, yada yada yada, and you repeat the process. Black Ops 4 tries to extend the shelf life though with the zombies and the Blackout mode. Now Blackout of course being the Battle Royale inclusion, which is trying to jump on the Fortnite and PUBG bandwagon, and reel players in. And apparently it's working, if Twitch viewer numbers are anything to go off. What kinda came as a bit of a surprise to me though is that most people prefer the Zombies mode over Blackout by a pretty sizable landslide. Zombies is actually much more developed I think here than the other iterations, and it also runs a lot better performance wise than the other modes, which is a plus. Zombies is of course pretty simple enough to explain. You hold out as long as possible against never-ending waves of zombies until you either give up or usually get killed. Split across 2 timelines, you've got to choose 4 perks for your loadout, with the 4th one falling under a modifier slot which greatly boosts its potency. Then you've got to choose a special weapon, which differs depending on the time zone. And these charge up the more you kill zombies, but you're also able to level them up twice during each match. For instance, the minigun can be leveled up to fire grenades and even turn into a tactical nuke at one point. And if that ain't enough for you, lastly, there's the elixirs, and I think there's a couple of dozen or so to be unlocked. And using these properly can pretty quickly shift the tide of a gunfight. And I gotta admit, I had a lot of fun playing this. The maps are great. There's one set in ancient Rome where you're fighting in the Colosseum and then exploring the catacombs beneath. Another map takes place in the Titanic, which is really eerie and just has this phenomenal atmosphere. And if you shelled out another 50 or so buckaroos, you can get to play the remade Pentagon map from Black Ops I. Now, I can't really fault Zombies mode in terms of the mechanics and how it all plays. This has always been a pretty polished and creative mode, and they just keep finding new ways to make it interesting. The thing is, I've just always found it kind of repetitive and just unrewarding. I find it far more fun to kill actual people in a game than just the same AI over and over. Zombies is always a fun enough mode until it just gets to the point where it starts to become artificially difficult and enemies turn into bullet sponges, or they just start including a whole heap of the special zombie types to really mess up your day. A match is always going to end with a player dying, that's just the way it is. You'll hold out for as long as you can, complete as many of the confusing and poorly communicated objectives as possible, then just try again. I get the appeal of the whole thing and I think playing with friends is a must, but it just never manages to grab me and keep my interest all that long. It's like a boxer going into the ring knowing he's going to throw the fight, you know what I mean? Like, I know what the outcome is going to be. Still, if you're buying Black Ops 4 for this mode alone, you're not going to be disappointed, and it's definitely, I think, the most fun Zombies has ever been. Finally, we come to Blackout, the series' first foray into the Battle Royale genre, and probably not its last. If you've played PUBG or Fortnite, you probably know how this whole thing works. So a whole bunch of people drop onto an island and do their best to scavenge weapons and items while avoiding... So a whole bunch of people drop onto an island and do their best to scavenge weapons and items while avoiding a murderous giant circle that slowly closes in on a randomly chosen location as everyone tries to murder their way to the #1 slot. It's a pretty simple formula, but it's proven very popular, and unless you've been living under a rock lately or spent your entire life in some kind of underground nuclear bunker, well, you've probably heard of all of this. Blackout definitely does feel more fast-paced and easy to get into than the likes of PUBG, and it actually has people playing it, rip. Even if it does lack a few mechanics you'd want to see in a multiplayer shooter, like the lack of a lean button. I like that when you pick up weapon attachments, they're automatically equipped to whatever weapon you're holding if that weapon allows it, meaning you don't need to spend all that much time buggering around in your inventory. I talked a little bit earlier about how I didn't think the time to kill in the multiplayer mode was all that different. Well, the time to kill in Blackout, that's something else entirely. And when someone happens to be wearing armor, especially level 3 armor, you'll notice that kill time goes up a whole heap. The other thing is that it seems like 90% of the people playing this mode are playing in squad, so even when you do enough damage to normally kill them, you're only going to be putting them in a down state. At this point, you still need to finish them off, or else they're able to crawl away and potentially get revived by their squad mates. It is definitely a mode that's better when played with friends, mostly because you're able to use voice chat much more easily and give callouts a lot quicker, but it also reduces the chances of team killing. Yeah, people in this game are fucking dicks, and in public groups it's not uncommon for someone to just shoot you in the back so they can steal your stuff. The upside to this increased time to kill, though, is that you're far less likely to just be simply killed in a single shot from some sniper rifle wielding asshole you couldn't have ever seen. If someone flanks you out in the open, you can often be screwed, but otherwise you can often find cover and avoid more damage if you're quick enough and the surroundings allow it. But on the downside, it can make the close to medium range gunfights fall at the mercy of the engine's absolutely horrible hit detection and netcode, which seems to function the same here as it does in the multiplayer mode. And we all know how that works, don't we? Yeah. Sucks. All of the modes in Black Ops 4 have their own levels, and Blackout has a bit of a weird progression system in the way that it kind of doesn't have a progression system. I mean, you level up each time you've made a certain amount of kills or completed enough challenges, but there's not really any benefit to leveling up as far as I could tell. You can collect items to unlock new skins, which is a bit of a tedious process, but these are entirely cosmetic, compared to the multiplayer mode where you unlock new weapons and all that kind of stuff. Blackout is kind of good in that way in that it's giving each player the same advantages from the get-go and everyone has access to the same weapons and items. You've just got to hope you drop in the right spot on the map to find them. And this is the aspect of these Battle Royale games that's always irritated me, just this concept of how luck plays a pretty big factor in the whole thing. I mean, I'm guessing if you've spent 50 hours in this mode, you could probably be as good with an SMG as you are with a sniper rifle, but quite often the combat takes place from medium to long range, and if you don't have the right kind of weapon, well, you're kind of screwed. And plenty of times you'll die right after dropping in because of the crappy RNG. I gotta say though, I don't know if you can really review the Blackout mode. I mean, it's hard to say if it's really objectively bad or good. It functions the way it's supposed to and it achieves what it sets out to do. And I think people are either gonna love it or hate it. At the moment, I'm kind of terrible at this mode and I don't think it's right for me to prophetically talk about it like I'm some kind of expert. But I can say that I prefer it to PUBG and Fortnite, so take that as you will.
Hey, good work.
The benefit of the whole thing is that if you're not into Blackout, well then you've got zombies to fall back on, and if you're not into zombies, well there's still the multiplayer as well. Black Ops 4 does seem like it's trying to have something for everyone, just as long as you're not that someone who wanted to see a single player campaign. If that's the case, well, sucks to be you, bro.
Stand down, Private. There'll be consequences.
Fuck your consequences.
If it wasn't for the Blackout mode, this would just be another by-the-numbers Call of Duty, aside from the slightly altered multiplayer. As it is and always has been, most people have already made up their minds about this thing before they've even watched this video. And I think most people know every year whether or not they're going to pick this one up.
Lighten up.
I guess overall the whole thing's okay as it could possibly be. And I guess I'll see you same time next year for the inevitable Blackout 2.